We now want to look at conflict resolution. Look at conflict and how it arises within organizations and what can be done to try and control the situation and to manage situations of conflict. It can arise because of disagreements over values and goals and motivation. So there's a whole range of ways in which conflict can arise. Essentially, it all bubbles down to differences in personality and differences in determination within people to achieve certain goals and certain outcomes. So the potential for conflict is always present within organizations. However, if it's managed correctly, conflict can be healthy, and conflict can lead to more competitiveness and more and better communications and collaboration. It can lead to a more effective way of working. But there's a fine line between that and letting it go too far, where there is conflict which is destructive. Conflict in which individuals within departments are in disagreement, they're not cooperating, there's a breakdown of communications and the flow of work has been disrupted, it becomes destructive. So there's a very fine line between having healthy rivalry and very unhealthy rivalry. If conflict's not resolved properly, it will have significant negative effects. So it's important that the management deal with this. Poorly managed conflicts can cause divisions. It can cause verbal abuse. It can cause rivalry between people, which is, as I said, highly destructive. Very low productivity and even chaos within the business, where individuals are not cooperating, they're not speaking to each other, they're not communicating, they're not the flow of work has been disrupted. They're not behaving with the business in mind. They're not behaving in a way that is conducive to achieving the overall business goal. So it can be chaotic. So why does conflict occur? Well, there's different working and learning styles. People are different. People are different. They have different ways of learning. They have different ways of working. Some people like to sit quietly and do their work and move the work along. Other people might want to sit and at the same time chat to others, and they're more animated about the way they go about their work. There are different styles of working, and these different styles may annoy each other. They may lead to annoyance within other workers, which may lead to conflict. Workers are, as I said, workers are very different, so they have different views and different goals and different ambitions. Some workers may be very ambitious within the business and may be annoying as a consequence, may be all the time looking for advantage over others, to score points, to say I am better than the other people in the office because I solved this problem and I dealt with it this way, and they volunteer for all the work because they want to be seen as good workers, and they want promotion perhaps, but it's causing resentment amongst the others. Simply personality clashes. People, as I said, are different. They'll have different personalities. Some will be quiet and some will be more extrovert, and some will be very ambitious, and some will be diligent, and this personality mix can lead to conflict. It can lead to sources of conflict where people are in disagreement, they just simply don't like each other. They don't like working with each other. They don't like sharing facilities. They don't like sharing the office or sharing the work floor with others. They want to not associate with them. They don't see them as nice people, or they don't see them as interesting people, or so just personality clash. But sometimes work itself can build up, and there can be peaks in work in which the flow of work is quite large, and the requirements on the workers is a lot. This puts the workers under stress, and this means they've got a short fuse. They're prepared to have an argument or dispute things very, very quickly. They're stressed, so they're on the edge of having a fight, having an argument, very, very easily. It can even be the case that in the case of workflow, where a particular job flows from one worker to the next, the worker handing on the extra burden may be resented by the one receiving it, even though that's the job. They may look at the worker and say, this is too much, I can't handle all of this. Why are you giving me so much? And blame that particular worker for passing it on. It's not reasonable, but such are people. And people have different viewpoints. It could be even down to very basic personality traits. It could be or particular interests. It could be some workers like particular sports or particular sporting teams. Others don't. It could be political views. It could be views about the environment, or it could be a whole variety of differences. And this can lead to resentment, objections, turmoil and stress, and eventually conflict. And the conflict can be very destructive in that sense. The working and learning styles, well, employees or groups have the same goal, vision, but adopt different methods for achieving them. So even though everybody knows what the goal of the organization is, know where the organization is trying to be, they have different ways of doing it, different ways of doing the work. And this can upset each other. Some may want to do it in a particular way, others want to do it differently. Stress can arise. And the way people speak to each other and explain why they're doing it in a particular way or what they're doing, even the way they speak to each other can be a source of stress and conflict. It's very beneficial for organizations to have a wide range of skills and personalities and experiences. It's nice to have an organization where people are different and it's an interesting working environment, and if it works. But if the differences are too wide, it can be very stressful. It can be a source of conflict, and that is counterproductive. Sometimes group approaches may collide, causing conflict within a group or between individual members of the group. Groups don't always see eye to eye. Even if it's a majority decision for the group to do something in a particular way, the ones who have been outvoted, the minority, will be upset and will disagree and may agitate to have the whole process changed again, or may not participate productively in the task. Again, a source of conflict. Managers or leaders must acknowledge that there may be a conflict brewing up, and they must adopt techniques to deal with it effectively. Management can't walk away when they see a situation which is leading to conflict, leading to strife. They should be able to intervene and soothe out smooth out and calm down what's happening. They should be able to deal with the workforce, perhaps separate the workforce, reallocate the work, have meetings and explain the importance of the work and explain why it's been done in a certain way, and try to resolve any comments and criticisms, and try to resolve the issue before it gets too big. It's important that the management deal with the workforce in this way. Otherwise, it can become very problematic. Now, there are different views, goals and ambitions. Well, departments may differ from each other and may be very defensive of each other. The administration may be defensive of itself against production, and the production may dislike marketing, and marketing may dislike the HR people. There's a whole range of differences, and if allowed to develop, the departments may become their own little empires. It has to be realized by all of the departments that they're all working in the same business, aiming to achieve the same set of goals. So differences between departments should be explained, and there should be recognition on the part of the departments as to their function within the organization. They should understand their function, and they should contribute to the overall set of goals of the organization. So the departments may cause conflict, and there may be conflict within the departments as well. Rivalry between individual members of staff, as I said earlier, competition for internal promotion, competition for recognition within the departments. Management need to set clear guidelines and structure within the organizations to allow effective communications within departments. So the management must enable the flow of information, and when there is a grievance or when there is an issue, have it dealt with quickly and efficiently before it festers and becomes a really big problem, a really big issue that can be very counterproductive and very destructive. Personality clashes, well, there can be a range of personality types, and they don't necessarily see eye to eye. This could be between employees and managers. The employees don't like the managers are seen as arrogant and forceful, or the managers may not like the employees because the employees are not committed to the achievement of the organizational goals as they see it. There could be a whole range of emotions. It could be the employees not liking each other for all sorts of reasons, because they've got different sporting interests, or they've got family problems outside, or whatever. The managers may not like each other as well. There may be differences between the managers. So the whole system should be viewed as a social network, but one which is, like all social networks I suppose, subject to problems and conflict, and which needs constant monitoring and constant intervention to stop situations getting out of control. Sometimes the individuals don't communicate effectively. Communications may be an issue. It may be that conflict arises from something small, simply because communications had broken down, or because the message was not clear. And because the message was not clear, the work was not finished to a high standard or to the required standard. But it wasn't the worker's fault. It was the message that was at fault. And it's important that the channels of communications are clear. the amount of noise in the communication system is kept to a minimum. Noise is what disrupts the message between the sender and the receiver. And that noise should be abolished or certainly kept under control. Whatever it is that disrupts the message, the communications message, should be observed, identified, and if possible, deleted. It should be recognized, however, that individuals have got biased opinions. People are people, and they've got their own backgrounds, their own education, their own family circumstances, they live in communities, so they've got very biased opinions of issues. And in work, having to cooperate with others who have totally different opinions about certain issues may be a problem. So the fact that there are people working in the organization doesn't mean it's harmonious. They may all be aiming at the same set of objectives: the continuance of the business, better employment prospects, receiving a salary at the end of the month or a wage at the end of the week which pays the bills, which enables the family to survive. That may be the requirement of the individual member of staff. But they've also got to accommodate not just the work requirements, but the requirements of working in that environment where people are so different and have different opinions and different viewpoints. And that could be a big ask, a big requirement. Managers need to understand personalities before forming teams. We talk about team formation as if it was a smooth, simple exercise. We simply have Mr. A, Miss C, Mr. D, and Mrs. X. They perhaps do not agree at all. These people are so different that any possibility of them working together as a harmonious team is out the window. It simply cannot happen. So forming teams is not a straightforward activity. The teams should be carefully selected. The people in the team should be capable of working together, of sitting down and communicating effectively and clearly about the tasks, and having some sort of social connection, being able to get along with each other in order to facilitate work and the time at work. The time at work is important as well, that they must get some satisfaction out of working in the organization. It should not all be a situation of conflict. So team formation is a problem, and it should be dealt with very carefully by the manager who's setting up the team. Not just a question of forming a team between 4 or 5 members and asking them to work together. That may not be possible. Some of the members of the team may be very forceful. Some may be very quiet and shy and may not want to air their views, even though their views may be the correct ones and the most efficient ones. They're just not forceful enough to push them through. I mentioned stress earlier. Well, high levels of stress is a common factor for a conflict. When people are under stress, that's when they are easy. That's when they're easily upset. That's when they are in situations where small points may cause aggression, may cause conflict. If they're not under stress, the same small points may be ignored or dealt with differently. Individuals have a breakdown point or a breaking point, and work deadlines, time pressure, and domestic issues There are all sorts of pressures on individuals. Some of them work, but some of them family life, social life. It could be the traffic, just getting to work. It can be all sorts of issues involved in leading to stress. And when individuals are in a situation of stress, that's when they cease to cooperate effectively, cease to communicate effectively, and situations of conflict can arise. So frustration emerges when they're under stress. Managers need to recognize these signals and aim to help the individuals in stress. It's important that the managers can do what they can in order to deal with stress. It may be changing the physical environment of the working situation, may be changing around the working situation to make it less stressful for the individual. It may be looking at the workload in detail and seeing ways of lightening the load. All sorts of ways in which management can look at this. Even if management can't do anything to alleviate the load, the workload, they can empathize, they can talk to the people and reassure them that they're on the same side and that they're going to try and deal with it in the medium term. They'll have new vacancies and new people will come in to try and take some of the workload or whatever. But at least the managers can recognize that the individuals are under stress and can try and deal with it by talking to the individuals and listening to their concerns. It's also the situation that individuals within organizations have different viewpoints. Individuals have different perspectives, and different perspectives can be very good for the organization, because looking at problems or looking at how work is conducted, taking different viewpoints can lead to efficiencies. It's questioning the existing processes and looking to new ways of dealing with the processes. So that's something very positive. So conflicts between viewpoints can bring in new ideas, which is a good thing. The danger here is that the differences in the viewpoints can be very wide, and if they're held by very strong-willed individuals, very forceful personalities, they can be very destructive. And that is the problem. Managers and leaders can resolve this by considering employees' views, and this will make employees feel valued. But different viewpoints can be good. Different viewpoints on situations can lead to innovations and changes which are very positive. But as I said, if they're held by very strong personalities, each of them will want to win, get their viewpoint accepted. And that is the source of conflict. The ones whose viewpoints are not accepted will feel aggrieved, upset, and there will be conflict. So it's a question of managers being able to accommodate the different viewpoints, being able to give and take, and perhaps have meetings with the personalities involved and try to resolve the issues in an amicable way. But issues can arise there. Now, conflict styles. Well, Kenneth Thomas and Ralph Kilman introduced the Thomas-Kilman conflict mode instrument at TKI approach to looking at conflict styles. And they identified 5 main styles in dealing with conflict. Now, we're not going to get heavily involved with this. We just want to mention that there are approaches to looking at conflict styles in the literature, but as I said, we're not going to get heavily engrossed in this. Essentially, the TKI is used by managers and leaders to assess how different types of conflict handling styles affect group development and dynamics. So it's a situation where there are models available, and they look at how to develop solutions or recommendations for how to handle the conflict. The Thomas Kilman and Kilman state that different people have different conflict resolution styles. Individuals can effectively resolve conflict if they know their conflict resolution style. So if individuals are aware that they have strong personalities and they're under stress and so on, then they may themselves set about resolving the issues. They may be aware that they're not having a good day. They're suffering from stress, or they didn't have a good start to the day, or whatever. So there can be conflict resolution styles that are, if you like, within the individual, and they are not going to make this into a bigger issue. They can deal with it themselves. They can deal with it, if you like, in their own heads. Conflict styles, well, useful in following situations. It's useful to know what the conflict styles can be. For example, enhanced communications between individuals. Now, that could help to alleviate some of the stress and some of the conflict and some of the misunderstandings that can lead to conflict. So better communications between individuals, and the management should ensure that when communications takes place, it's clearly understood. The requirements of each task is clearly understood. Sometimes it's better if the requirements of the task come from management itself rather than coming from a fellow worker. If a fellow worker says what's required, it can cause resentment, because people think they are passing off some of their own work to somebody else. So it's better if there's clear recognition. But then again, that depends on the nature of the work. Sometimes that cannot be done. It depends on what the work is and what the outcomes are required, what outcomes are required. Leadership skills are good in dealing with conflict as well. Leadership skills means being aware of issues that can lead to conflict and leading the team by inspiring the team or inspiring the workers to follow certain procedures and aiming at certain goals. And building strong teams, that's good. If the teams can agree, if certain people can work together and to work together smoothly and harmoniously, then that's a strong team. And the chances of conflict will be minimized because the team relate to each other. That may be possible. Stress management, well, it may be the case that some expertise is required from the outside to look at situations of stress and try to deal with the stress, try to reduce what's causing stress within the organization. So maybe outside consultants will be brought in to look at the requirements of the job to see if something can be done to alleviate the stress. Or it may be, if they don't want to use outside consultants, that regular meetings could take place between management and staff to discuss situations of stress and what can be done. The danger here is that the meetings themselves may be situations of stress, where dominant personalities are again trying to force through certain points and get their agenda across, and others may object, and the meeting itself may degenerate into a situation of stress. So sometimes it's best to have an outside person looking at the situation and making recommendations. When conflict is resolved, there's a better chance of employee retention. Workers don't want to leave. Sometimes workers leave because they don't like the working environment, they don't like their colleagues, they don't like the management, they don't like the stress that they've been put under. But when these issues are dealt with, there's a better chance of employee retention. And of course, that's the cheapest way to manage staff. If there's a high labour turnover within the business, it's expensive. Paying agency fees to recruit people, training them, getting them familiar with the working environment and the requirements of the job, that's expensive. So it's better if the conflict can be resolved so there's better employee retention. And it removes employee it improves employee motivation and satisfaction. If there is less conflict, the workers are happier, they like working for the organisation, they want to make a contribution, they're more motivated, and it's a better environment all round. Now let's go back and look at this TKI model we talked about earlier, the Thomas Kilman model. Now, measure behaviour in conflict situation. So we're looking at conflict situations or a conflict situation, and we're measuring behaviour. Now, individual behaviour can be described as assertive and or cooperative. So assertive is when individual behaviour is trying to push through their opinions. Cooperative is when they're trying to accommodate others and work together. So we have two possible situations there. Now the conflict resolution style, well, approaches to the conflict resolution. First of all, there's competitiveness, and it may be a situation that individuals are competing, and it may be that there's an agreement that because of the competitiveness of the situation, one solution is dominant and is better, and if an agreement can be had amongst the team members, then that would be the solution. But competitiveness can also be destructive because it may be seen as one member of the organisation trying to bully through his or her opinions and force them on others. So when we talk about competitiveness, it can be constructive. It could lead to a dominant solution that everyone clearly must agree with because it's so obvious. It's so much better than everybody else's. Or it could be that it's seen as one person trying to bully through their opinions and get everyone else to agree. So it could be very destructive or it could be constructive. Sometimes people have accommodating personalities, or to make suggestions that are accommodating. They're trying to incorporate others. That doesn't mean it's necessarily a very efficient suggestion, because efficiency may be sacrificed at the cost of accommodating different perspectives and different viewpoints. Perhaps the most efficient solution is the one that will have least support within the team that's meeting to resolve a conflict. So it may be the case that by accommodating they will all agree to work together, but in terms of the organization the outcome is not most efficient. So there's a trade-off. Either the organization experiences conflict and disagreements and poor working conditions and poor cooperation between the various members of staff, and even high absenteeism and employees leaving employment because of the stress created, or they accommodate each other and a less efficient outcome for the organization may emerge as a consequence. So they are managing their stress by, if you like, making the whole process less efficient. That's a possible situation when we consider accommodation. It's also the case, of course, that they deal with conflict by avoiding it. Simply get round the conflict. They don't deal with the issue. There is a situation of conflict. The conflict is caused by a peak in work, let's say at a particular time in the month, just before the accounts are closed for the month or whatever. There's a peak of activity. But the workers try to avoid the conflict by moving the work into different parts of the month, moving some of the activities to the middle of the month or at the start, or reorganizing the requirements of work so as to avoid conflict. It may be, if it's a personality issue, simply don't sit together. They move away and they agree to disagree. They agree not to be near each other or to have much contact. But it gets over the situation of conflict. Could be collaborating, that they all sit down and agree. They collaborate. They're trying to find solutions to the problem, and they're trying to agree how to resolve the situation of conflict. So they meet as a team almost, and or to form a team. They form themselves into a quasi-team to try and collaborate to avoid the conflict. They try to agree on what they're going to do to avoid the conflict. Most times the removal of conflict involves some compromise, and that's the problem. Some strong-willed individuals may not be prepared to compromise, or there may be issues about who's compromising most or what's being compromised. So the whole exercise in compromising may lead to conflict itself, or it may bring conflict to the surface. Individual members of staff may say, you're expecting me to compromise most, and I disagree. Why don't we share it out more? And others will say, we are sharing it out, it's just it seems to be falling on you, but it's not really. So there may be issues of conflict there, and the conflict could be related to the act of compromising. Now let's go back and deal with these just again in a little bit more structured format. So we're going to look at the Thomas Kilmann's conflict resolution styles, and we have 5 points here. This is the 5 points mentioned by them, and we'll start with competitiveness and go through these again just very quickly. So competitiveness it's when people are not cooperative. They are competing. They are competing to try and get their individual points of view across. They're trying to get their individual points of view accepted as the way forward. So they are not compromising, they are competing, and they're trying to prove to management and to each other that their views are the best. They are the most competitive and best solutions. So it's not cooperative. The competitive individual is only concerned about his own gain, his or her own gain and feelings. They're not really that interested in others. They're trying to get their viewpoint across and accepted. So they are not really taking others into account. Their ability to get their points of view accepted depends on their power, depends on their position in the organization, depends on the way they're seen in the organization, what respect they carry within the organization, what position they hold within the organization, and in the past did they have ideas which were very successful, or in the past did they come up with ideas which were unsuccessful. So whether their ideas are accepted or not is a function of their power, their position, and their expertise. The competitive position can be beneficial when making fast decisions. Clearly, when a quick decision is made, then looking for opinions from a number of staff it can be time consuming, but having one person who is very forceful and very strong and very competitive and wants to show that his or her opinions are the best way forward, and they will organize and deliver quick papers to try and gain an advantage over the others, it's a fast decision. It can lead to very efficient decision making. Whether it's good decision making or not depends, but at least it's done very fast. The ones who don't win may feel resentful and demotivated, and there could be bad feelings. So there can be issues there, that individuals who have opinions that have been rejected, they may feel resentful, may feel alienated from the organization. Now the second one is accommodating. It's the opposite of competitiveness. There's a more cooperative approach used. The individual expresses concerns to others, and she is willing to negotiate and come to an agreed position. So this is where they're accommodating. They're talking to each other. The individual members of staff are talking to each other, and they're trying to agree on the best way forward. They can be very accommodating. They can try to take everybody's viewpoints into account and try to integrate the best thinking from each one and try to get a solution which is valued by everybody. And what they're trying to do is to win peace. Because it's accommodating, it doesn't mean it's necessarily the best solution, because it has parts of everybody's opinions, and there may be elements of contradiction and conflict. Conflict in the sense that the whole job doesn't fit together smoothly. It's not efficiently designed, but it's accommodating. There's no conflict within the members of staff. There may be conflict within the job itself. The parts of the job are being duplicated or even replicated, or there's too much documentation associated with the job, or it may not be efficient. But there's no conflict within the staff. They're trying to accommodate their own differences and work together as a team. So there's a trade-off. Harmonious staff, but not so efficient for the organization. Avoiding, well, individuals avoid the conflict. They prefer not to hurt each other's feelings and just accept situations as they are. They avoid the conflict if they can. They don't want to create arguments. They don't want to create problems and engage in fighting amongst each other and quarrelling amongst each other. It occurs when the individual is certain that a situation is not in their favour. So they tend to avoid the conflict. They see the conflict. They see that it's not in their in their favour what's being proposed, but they don't want to make a fight over it. They don't want to get involved with situations which are situations of conflict. They just want to get on with the job and get the job done, and they're not. Sometimes they're alienated from the business itself. They don't care, and sometimes people like this may be near retirement, or they may be not committed to the organisation. They don't see it as their future. They're not prepared to make a fight of it. They're not committed. Or maybe it's just their personality. They don't like conflict, so they're prepared to put up, I should say, with the recommendations, even though it's not in their favour. Not a good approach to take, because perhaps comment on a proposal will lead to strengthening the proposal. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be conflict or going to lead to quarrels or fights or arguments. It may be just some comments on the proposal will lead to refinement of the proposal and a better proposal as a consequence. Collaborating, well, it's the opposite of avoiding. This style is based on meeting the needs of all the people involved in the conflict. So there's a conflict, all the requirements of the people are considered, and they try to find some way of accommodating all the different viewpoints to resolve the issue. The people can effectively cooperate and establish the importance of the people concerned to the issue. So what they're trying to do is to look at who is involved in the conflict, look at what the nature of their concerns are, and see if they can work together to resolve those, as opposed to fighting and disputing the various issues. Obviously, this is useful when there is a variety of different perspectives on an issue. Looking at all the viewpoints may actually improve the overall proposal. So when there's a conflict over some proposal, looking at different viewpoints regarding that proposal, taking all the viewpoints into account, may lead to a better solution overall, a better proposal. And then compromising. The individual aims to find a solution that will satisfy everyone and prevent any resentment from arising. So the individual will look at trying to prevent resentment from arising. So they look to compromise. They take their own position and are prepared to give in on certain parts of it so as to accommodate other people's opinions. It falls partially between competing and accommodating. The individuals concerned are expected to give up something in order to arrive at the best solution. So they don't fight for everything they want, they're just prepared to give up parts of it. Compromising is beneficial when there are work deadlines approaching or both parties hold equal power. So if the team, all the members of the team are equally powerful, then compromising is what's required. If they don't compromise, the conflict can be very large and very destructive and may lead to some members resigning from the organisation, resigning from the company, which is to the detriment of the business itself. So compromising is beneficial when there are work deadlines approaching, or when the parties involved in the conflict are equally powerful. Now, the TKI model, well, managers and leaders can use these different styles to prevent or resolve conflicts effectively. So it's important to know which style is being used. And we're able to adopt and use the 5 conflict handling styles to suit the situation we are in and the type of conflict. So we have 5 styles. We know which of the styles is being used, the types of personalities that are involved in the conflict, and we try to look for compromise, or we try to avoid, or we try to accommodate, or whatever it is, and find a solution accordingly. Now, the conclusion. Well, resolving conflicts will give room for better group membership understanding. So if we can get rid of the conflict, we'll have a better understanding within the organisation. There'll obviously be better group cohesion because there's no conflict, so the groups get along together much better. And there was also a development of self-knowledge, that the individuals recognise they're working in a team, they're working together, they're working in situations where conflict can arise, and in order to avoid the conflict they become more self-aware. They know what their contribution is, they know what they're doing within the organisation, they know what others are doing and what the others require. They know the personalities, they know there are differences. So there's much more knowledge about what is required to work within the organisation to try and avoid conflict. So this is quite a long class. I'd ask you to go back over the class and skip through it. Just use the fast forward and fast backward buttons on the video and make some notes. Pay particular attention to the TKI model at the end and look at the 5 points that are mentioned there that we spent quite a lot of time looking at. Be aware of those. Those are important. And that's all I'm going to do on this session. So I'm going to leave it at that now and say thank you for watching.